Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today on one of the hottest days of the year. Much appreciated. Hopefully you're all outside watching this. I'm your host for today, Peter Sumpton, and today we're going to have something slightly different. It's not a presentation as such, although there are slides, as you can see. It's a Q&A session on the consultation to the industry that the BBA created, produced, curated, with the title of Construction Product Assessment Relating to High Risk Residential Buildings. I'm delighted to be joined today by Hardy Giesler, the CEO of the BBA, and Bill Hewlett, Technical Director of the BBA and the lead on this consultation. Good morning, chaps.
Morning, Peter.
Morning, Peter.
Morning. Okay, so what are we going to do today? So we're going to cover the consultation review, what we've done so far, why the BBA felt it was important to do this consultation, what we discovered, and finally a Q&A, and we'll get into the real details of which you all want to hear. Please use the Q&A functionality in this webinar. If you've got any questions, we'll try to cover them at the end. If we don't get round to them, we will get back to you with an answer. Final thing before we do move on is, if you haven't seen the report yet, I'm going to send a link in the chat. If you go to that link after the webinar, there's a summarized version of the report and a more detailed, in-depth version. So please take a look at that. Really important, really interesting read. Okay, so let's get into this. First of all, intro to the BBA. If you've been on any of our webinars this year, you'll have seen these two slides previously, so I'll do this really quickly. But for anybody that doesn't know, BBA have been around for over 50 years, and we are helping the construction and manufacturing industry build confidence right through the entire supply chain. The BBA look to develop long-term partnerships with our clients and associations. And this is to enable growth both in the UK and in global marketplaces. The BBA is actually a for-profit organisation limited by guarantee, so they always look to reinvest into the industry as a whole to the benefit of you, me, and all stakeholders within construction. Some numbers, who doesn't love some numbers? So to date, let's focus on the two big numbers on the screen. To date, the BBA have issued over 6,000 certifications and rising, and also created over 1,000 annual inspections. And there's a few other numbers on there. Read them at your leisure for a couple of seconds before we move on to the topic of today. Okay, so just a little bit about the consultation process, just to give you a bit of background. It was launched on the 18th of Feb 2021, and it started with a series of interviews followed by quantitative surveys, and this covered the entire construction industry. We wanted to make sure that we covered the whole supply chain to get as much information from varied sources as possible. This included BBA clients, product and material manufacturers, as well as the certificate users, architects, specifiers, insurers, and the likes. Why was this important? Well, we did the consultation to address the role that building product certification has to play and how it can assist meeting the higher safety standards required for high-rise residential buildings. And this was on the back of Dame Judith Hackett's 2018 report, Building a Safer Future. So I'll cover the intentions and then the results, and then we'll dig deeper into those results. So the consultation was really aimed at gaining feedback on 4 key elements. Number 1, earlier involvement with certification clients. This meant getting involvement or getting involved with the client's product development process sooner. An enhanced testing regime that will see the BBA actively seek involvement in testing. So this meant engaging throughout product development processes, in-depth test result reviews and observations, including fire testing. Number 3, was sample analysis and characterization, or fingerprinting as it's more commonly known. This isn't without its challenges, but this is about storing original samples as reference points and having that product sample DNA or fingerprint. And finally, regular and ongoing testing regime post-certification, which is essentially an enhancement of the current pre-certification testing that the BBA currently do. More importantly, what did we find? Well, we got an extensive amount of feedback, and we narrowed this down to 4 key points, of which we'll discuss today. So the first point was that we discovered the BBA agreement certification is seen in high regard in the industry, both now and going into the future. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and that was uncovered during the feedback. Number 2, improvements needed to focus on systemizing a BBA process, or the processes we have internally, testing, a focus on digitization across the board, sustainability, and collaboration within the industry. Number 3 was the original working title and 2-tier agreement plus concept was not the route forward, although it was discovered that modular certification was seen to be of benefit. And finally, number 4, the highest risks to the building environment were seen as poor workmanship and uncontrolled value engineering. And that is a really, really top level summary of what we discovered. So let's get into why we are here today. I think I've rambled on for enough, but hopefully I've given you a good overview of why we've done what we've done, a top level review of the results. So what I'd like to do now is pass the baton over to Hardy and Bill. So first of all, Hardy, if I can come to you as CEO, let's start with why was it important for the BBA to lead on addressing the findings in Dame Judith's report, especially relating to product testing and certification?
Morning, Peter, and good morning to everyone who's on the call. And also a big thank you, first of all, for your time today. And for those of you and others who have participated in this consultation, that's very much appreciated. And a big thank you to all of you. So when I decided to join the BBA in December 2019 and then joined in January 2020, I read the Dame Judith Hackett review a number of times because I felt it was quite a sad but seminal moment in our industry. And I imagined that the world of construction in the UK would be very different after that horrendous fire at the Grenfell Tower. And the BBA has been around for over 50 years as far as product certification for construction products concerned. We're seen as a market leader, and as such, there is an obligation on us to contribute to growth and to development within the industry. We also have a very new leadership team within the business, joined by a very, very strong base of technical expertise and experience in our field. And we think those two combined have a lot to bring to the market, and we wanted to play a leading part. For us, it's all about being relevant to the industry. And it is clear that the higher risk residential buildings have specific requirements that are required for that particular application, and we weren't entirely sure whether our existing Agrimont certification scheme covered those requirements, and that's why we put some thoughts together as to how we believe it could be improved, and we took those thoughts to the market as part of this consultation.
Excellent, thank you. That's a fantastic summary. So let's get into this then. Bill, I'd like to come over to yourself. You were the lead in this consultation. If I just skip back one slide, can you just give us a bit more feedback on these 4 findings that people can read in this consultation document?
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. And I'd particularly like to thank everyone who gave us the feedback that contributed to this consultation finding, which has been hugely valuable to BBA, and I hope we can show overall to the industry as well. I think that the first thing, Peter, just to take your question, you've got the 4 points there that we particularly focused on. Sorry, can we go back one more slide, I think? Just want to, that's it, yeah. So the intention of the consultation, those were the 4 things that we put out to the market to test primarily in the consultation, although I have to say that was probably only 50% of the feedback. There was plenty other besides that. But if I could just refer to those 4 points, perhaps give a bit of a heads up on what came back to us. So the first one there about earlier involvement with client certification clients. The first thing we identified really is that we come in at technology readiness level, or TRL level, for those that are familiar with that, which is quite late in the product development stage. Levels 8 or 9, which is really right at the end, just immediately prior to putting the products on the market. So earlier engagement would be back at the early stages of product evolution, the formation of the idea, TRL 2 to 4. So certifiability at that sort of stage and what would be involved. So how does particularly an SMT or an SME or someone with a particularly complex product, how can they go about achieving certification? What are the steps they need to take to plan for, to budget, etc.? So that was an area we could add a lot of value to. And also towards the end stages, how can the tests and processes that developers of products quite naturally use in those later stages, how can that bring best value to mesh with the certification process? The original intent of this particular point was perhaps how can we flush out those who might be unscrupulous around the way in which they do testing and what they present. I think perhaps a bit of pragmatic feedback from manufacturers particularly as well. If someone wants to evade the system, they'll probably find a way of evading it. You can't create traps for people, they'll just work around that. But I think coupled with that was a pretty strong view that the BBA has a high technical standard, as you said. I've certainly found that since I came into the industry, and a high ethical position, and bringing that into that product development process would be advantageous. So it just raises the game there. So there was good support for that proposal. Moving on to the second one, enhanced testing regime for initial certification. Engagement in the testing there. I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding here, and perhaps I'll recap some of that 50-year history in the answer to this question. Originally, BBA was set up not to do testing, but to use the tests of others, and there was quite a strong distinction between BRE and what the BRE did and what BBA did, and indeed BBA was on a different site. But breaking that down now, I think most people would expect the BBA to be heavily involved in testing, and there is quite a bit of feedback, why aren't you? But I think the question perhaps didn't make it clear enough or emphasize strongly enough that we are heavily involved in testing that happens, and certainly all test reports and results are very heavily scrutinized by our teams, as well as us doing quite a high level of testing. So the question here was really whether we shouldn't just skip to doing all the testing. There was feedback on that, pushback. I mean, some people are not well positioned to do their own testing, others are well positioned to do that, or indeed they go to third-party UCAS accredited laboratories, and where that's happening, yeah, absolutely fine, we would certainly embrace that. But I think the default would be that we start by considering we would take the lead on all testing, which seems like a very sound idea, and most people would embrace that. But the main advantages were identified around sampling. So getting the right samples and being open about which samples are used and not picking golden samples, if you like, is important, and we can add value that way, and indeed must do and should do. We can embed good practice in longevity of tests, do what's sometimes called round robin testing, where you have maybe 3 or more parallel streams of testing. So you don't just do one test on a product, you do several tests and compare results. And timeliness was the other area. Very often we're finding that client bodies are getting delays in their process, either because they're using third parties, or maybe they haven't used the right test, or they just can't produce the results. So if we've got more control over that testing, we can add timeliness. So the conclusion there was to default to all in-house testing, but obviously with a case-by-case acceptance that maybe something different would be better. On the third one, the fingerprinting, I think fingerprinting is started from the notion that that offered a way to revolutionise both supply chain, logistics and control. And I think that remains a possibility, but that may be some way off. So the feedback was more about what can we do in the short term. So baseline characterization was a key topic here. And of course, that would go beyond chemical fingerprinting in any case, because you might want to know physical dimensions, for example, not just the chemistry of the product. And to support smart labeling technologies. So a great deal can be achieved through RFID, QR codes and so forth. So how can the BBA get more integrated with that? Indeed, that might be an aspect of product production that we wish to certify as part of what we look at. And I have to say this was probably the proposals listed the most discussion, and there were 4 quite strong recommendations on this particular one. So BBA to seek ways to support moves in the industry towards smart technologies like RFIDs and QR codes. BBA to seek ways to assist the industry to use visually obvious marking. I mean, this is perhaps a very easy win. Plasterboard, for example, is shaded in different colours according to its properties or its performance characteristics. That sort of technique could be used more widely. How can baseline characterization in its broadest sense be used more extensively, at the very least to save cost? And the 4th one was BBA to seek ways to support the development of fingerprinting as a chemical, based on chemical composition, as a benefit for the future. The 4th proposal there, this actually got the single highest mark of any of the proposals, getting an 87% approval, strongly approved from the client, from the certificate user groups. So in principle, it's a no-brainer. We just need to work out the detail and introduce these processes either at 3-year review going forwards with existing certificates or indeed from the initial certification. Good bit of feedback, particularly at review stage, was to use mystery shopper methodologies for sampling, and also to inspect sites to see how products are performing in the flesh, so to speak. So that was the high-level feedback, Peter. Thank you.
Excellent, fantastic. Would you like to elaborate on the results as well?
Yeah, I think it's perhaps the overarching comment is that all 4 proposals got good support. The feedback from certificate users was particularly positive, being well up in the 80s across the board. Just double check that. I think the 3rd one might have been below the 80s. No, 63% on the 2nd one, but I think that derived more from misunderstanding around, well, not misunderstanding, but a view that fingerprinting, yeah, great idea, but it's one for the future, perhaps more than now. So perhaps it got a bit less support on that basis. But having had the discussions around baseline characterization more generally, and the use of smart labeling, that would be, again, strongly supported. So, the detail of the result, the survey was ably assisted by Mason Mentor, who did the quantitative survey, which gathered a lot of data. That is presented in full and unedited by us. We've just basically plonked their report in the appendix A of the report. So that's freely available to all. So anyone who's very keen on numbers and statistics, I suggest they download that and have a good look. I think it'd be a bit overwhelming at this point in a webinar to go through that in detail, Peter, but obviously I can if someone's got a specific question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, the link to that report, both a summarised version and a detailed version, is in the chat if people haven't seen it already. Hardy, one thing on there, the 3rd point down in the results was, to coin a phrase, agreement plus, which was kind of a working title for the consultation, if you like, or an abbreviated shortened version of what is now construction product assessment relating to higher risk residential buildings. Apologies. One thing I'd quite like to know is if you could tell us a bit more about that idea and why the BBA stepped away from that kind of thinking.
Thanks, Peter. So when we decided to go to market with a consultation, we were trying to tread a careful path between going to the market with a blank sheet of paper saying we'd like to improve, please tell us how, which I didn't think would be very helpful. And on the other hand, bringing something to market that is seen as too prescriptive and too finalized, and where we were effectively looking for rubber stamping from the market. And from past experiences, we have learned that the market quite rightly did not appreciate that, and we didn't want to go down that route again. So we're trying to find a middle ground. And we know that the Agramont brand is a very strong brand, so we didn't want to launch something, a different brand. So we launched something called Agramont Plus and working title. It actually says working title in the consultation document that we launched in February. So I think that is absolutely no issue for us. Whatever it's called, it's the content that is more important, that it's fit for purpose, and that has the buy-in from the wider marketplace. And that's the whole point of the consultation. I think the reason this took on a bit of a life of its own is someone in the media picked up on this and turned into a headline, which I can't blame them for. I mean, if you look at Bill and I, we don't really represent Harrison Ford or Tom Cruise, and I won't take that further because I can only get myself into trouble. So struggling to find a headline that's interesting out of BBA consultation maybe is quite a hard task, but it has no relevance to us, whatever it's called. The market has said we prefer it if it's just called Agramont, and that for products where it's relevant, the higher risk residential building elements are added or amplified. And that makes a lot of sense to us, and we're happy to go with that.
Fantastic, excellent. So Bill, you were the lead on this consultation. Did anything surprise you by the feedback from the interviews or indeed the survey that was conducted?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Peter. Yeah, I only joined BBA in January, and this launched in February. So it was, I mean, you could view it as back bar on the one hand, you could view it as an induction on the other. I think as someone in the industry, I'd always held the BBA Agramont certification in the highest regard, indeed sort of with some mystique almost around what it did and the people who did it. But what did surprise me was the strength of confirmation of that viewpoint. There was a warmth of engagement and support for the Agramont concept that was very, very heartening, and new to the business, really reinforced my own feelings about joining the business and joining this journey. And that was great. And that was represented, of course, in the level of feedback and interest in the consultation. So, many people engaged. There was something like 55 interviews that we did. Nobody said it was too difficult to find time to do it. People were asking more and more for the opportunity to contribute. Yeah, that was perhaps the most surprising factor. I think perhaps just to go back to Hardy's point about the Agramont Plus concept. I mean, if anything, there's perhaps a more amalgam basement answer to that question, is around the idea that, well, why wouldn't you just do it across the board? How many products are there that would be suitable for high-rise residential buildings that wouldn't be suitable on another building anyway? So, or vice versa. So why wouldn't you just have one pattern, as it were, across the board? And I think that was quite a strong piece of feedback as well. So a real feeling that let's make Agramont certification really fit for its purpose, and expand the application of that, and perhaps get a bit more diverse around how it can be applied. So the idea of modular certification came from that. So we had something that's flexible, fit for purpose. Of course, somebody came to us with a product and said, well, we only want to use it on low rise. Well, okay, maybe there's some differences there around how we might certify, but that doesn't mean you get a different brand of certificate. It just means it's clear within the certification that we use and issue. So yeah, so great, great positive warmth and engagement, a real feeling that Agramont is part of the solution that the industry needs. And that was a very good, warm feeling. Thank you.
And I think just to reiterate that point, when I was talking to people that helped you do the initial scoping and surveying before it went to an independent party, it was abundantly clear how much people wanted to be part of this and wanted to give their points and opinions, not for BBA bashing or not for having a go at the construction industry or anything like that, just simply because they wanted things to be better in the industry, right across the supply chain. They wanted things to be better, to mitigate more risk, to be safer, to be secure, just to have a better industry, which was fantastic to see and hear and see it actually in action.
Yeah, there's work to do. We all know there's work to do, but BBA is part of that solution, and Egremont is part of that solution.
And just on that point, I think internally it is the one thing that the BBA can focus on, what we can change internally or what we can do. So some of the points that were raised, some of the items that need addressing that have come from this consultation. Hardy, how is the BBA looking to improve efficiencies actually within the BBA?
Thanks, Peter. So for those of you on the call that I've spoken to or speak to regularly, you'll know that there's a great passion in the business to improve the performance of the BBA. So beginning of last year, we set 2 objectives overall for the business. The first one is to become a system-driven organization, and that speaks to efficiencies, it speaks to standardization, it speaks to focusing efforts on the content rather than the process of delivering the content. And the second one was to become a client in the market and an industry-focused organization. For the wealth of information that BBA holds to be relevant, it has to be integrated into other people's workflows. We are very much a digital company that needs to integrate access to our information in ways that are fit for purpose for people who use the information. So you can imagine a builder on a building site using a mobile device versus an architect designing a building using some of the software packages, Autodesk or Bentley. So our information needs to be there, needs to be integrated. So we've got a long way to go as far as that's concerned. We kickstarted the program called Project Alpha. Bill and I have just come out of a senior management team session for a couple of hours with an update on that. We set 2 very clear objectives for that program. The first one is on-time delivery in full every time. And the second one is best-in-class communications to our clients. And that was based on direct feedback from our clients. This is what they wanted us to focus on. And that is what we are focusing on. And once that is delivered, we will continue to improve the service we bring, add new services, drive bigger efficiencies where possible. So we're on a journey. If anybody is interested in more details, now that we're allowed to, we'd welcome you to come and visit us in our somewhat unstate-of-the-art building for now. That will change next year. And come and visit us, and we'll happily introduce you to people and talk you through the changes we're making. And hopefully you can share some of that journey with us and provide us with some helpful feedback as well.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Just one point on that, Hardy, there is we are based in the south and the north now, so there's no real excuse not to come and visit us now.
Great.
Okay, so final question, really. We've spoken about the consultation, why we did that, some of the results that we got from that. But the real value in any kind of consultation is what we do next from the information that's been gathered. So I'd like to ask you both, but first of all, Bill, what are the next steps?
Yeah, so I'm conscious we're in the last minute here, Peter. I'm going to refer to the report. The very last section of the main text of the report is called Next Steps. There was a huge amount of feedback, and it took me quite a bit of time to sort of channel that down, filter that down into some concrete actions. They're listed there. There's 9 of them. The first was to publish the results. We've done that, and you've given the link there, Peter, so thank you for that. But if I can just pull out some top ones, modular certificate form that gives flexibility for the future, addressing sustainability, that needs more focus. Digitization, Hardy's outlined, I'll give them the reasons there. Absolutely right, we've got to increase the relevance of our information, how it's used. And then I think more focus towards certificate users. I had some feedback during the interviews. This was the first time, although I use certificates on a daily basis, I've ever heard from anyone at the BBA. So, that's a bit of a own goal in the past. It's not something we shall stick with for the future, so up our game in that result. So I just draw attention to those particular next steps, but do have a look at the report, it's all there.
Excellent. And Hardy, anything to add to that?
No, just thank you to Bill, who's done a fantastic job with his team to pull this all together. Bill joined us in January, and he had an introduction on day 1 and day 2. I think he picked up this consultation, and it's kept him more than busy since then. So thank you to Bill and those who helped him and all those who participated. This has been a huge learning experience for us, and we will take the results on board and drive this further.
Absolutely. Bill, any final words?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone who contributed and look forward to that further engagement and the journey going forward. Thank you.
Excellent, fantastic, chaps. From me, thank you so much for joining us and elaborating on this consultation. Massively important. There's more to come. I'm pretty sure if this is well received, which no doubt it will be, that we'll do it again when we've got some other information to provide the industry. From me and the BBA and from Hardy and from Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know everyone's busy. I know it's glorious outside. So even 30 minutes of your busy day is always well received for you joining us. Any questions that have been asked during this Q&A or presentation, if you like, that we haven't got around to answering, we will get back to you in answering those questions, because it's important that we keep that dialogue going regardless of the questions. So we will get back to you, and apologies for not answering any questions. So finally, from me, the BBA and Hardy and Bill, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Peter.
Have a great day. Thank you.